You are watching
Kurt,
Xirtus.
imagine let's role play. Imagine it's 1920, and you work for the Park and Games Association, which is underneath like the wildlife and agriculture and all these administrations, which are now kind of in the military because the military is making sure after World War I and into World War II everything is safe. And you come across, I don't know, Sasquatch, something that's not normal. Like, do you tell? Do you protect it? Do you keep it amongst your like small agency amongst your friends? Like, what do you do if you discover something like Sasquatch?
I probably wouldn't do shit, to be honest. I'm like, oh yeah, just I think it's the best. The best form of karma would just be to be like, all right, you're doing your thing, man. That's perfectly fine. I think the best way to protect you is to not fucking tell a soul on this goddamn planet that you are here.
Well,
I
because no
think
one's going to believe you, and you're going to end up in a room with white walls and your arms like this, and you can't really move them that far.
basically, yeah. That's why.
But although there's a guy who went on Joe Rogan who's using water to erode the tundra in Alaska, and he's finding all types of mammoth bones and other types of with the short-faced bear or something like that. But he says every now and then there's a situation where if you find what you think is like a Yeti pelt and skull and body, the remains of something that's like partially decomposed. Now, was it stuck in the permafrost for 10,000 years, or did it die like last Thursday? And then you call the local authorities because, the skull technically looks like a human. I don't know, was it wearing like a bear suit? And then the local authorities also don't want to end up in the white room.
Yeah, you just pretend it was really old. Yeah.
And so it's like the geopolymer debate. If you say that all the stones in Peru are geopolymer, people are going to start cracking them open to find out if there's anything inside of them. And then there's not going to be any more
camera
room.
When you take the picture is all you do. So that if you want to believe you can, but it's not a clear picture.
But the same thing with most cryptid sightings, right? There would be some Bigfoot hunters or people that would come to the area if there was some sort of international news release that, we don't know if this thing died 10,000 years ago or last year, but here, look, coming out of the permafrost, instead of a frozen woolly mammoth, instead of a frozen tiger cub, or there's frozen dogs they found. If someone did find a giant frozen humanoid or human-like thing, I wonder, what is the proper reaction to have?
Will is drawing super hard right now. I can tell. He's got some art happening right there.
Ow. But Will, have you heard of the Alexander technique as a not a fitness modality, but no,
the Alexander technique? What's that?
Yeah. Well, it's the idea that when you're moving, and especially if you're doing something vocational where you're drawing, and it's the way I came across it was learning about massage and standing over a person, and if you're hunching and leaning into what you're doing, again, pretend there's like a ballet teacher or a yoga teacher behind you, and whatever you're doing, like the Alexander technique is kind of existing in the role, like trying to get into flow state with what you're doing, and then check in with the role of the person that's like standing behind you with your hand on your shoulder going, now don't slouch, like make sure you keep your head back, or adjust your, make this more ergonomically friendly, or
well, Will had been doing some research recently with Frank Zero on reptilian shapeshifters, which I kind of relate to this in a lot of ways, because also there's this idea of, you see Sasquatch, and then you tell your boss, and then your boss shifts back into a lizard person and tells his friends,
Right.
I don't know. That was more of an icebreaker than a.
Well, no, and again, you don't even have to really tell someone. I found some rare mushroom fungus, or no, it was the Monotropa uniflora, which is like a medicinal plant that grows off the fungus that grows off the roots of a certain type of tree. And I started filming all this stuff, and then I realized now there's a geotag and geolocated to this film, and again, I haven't gone back to see if someone's harvested it all or dug it up, but I chose not to touch it out of just assumption that was someone's yearly wages right there, probably.
But Kurt, you're trying to have low karma, not like interrupt the lifestyle of the Sasquatch. What do you think about lizard people, or the idea that there are those who live amongst us that look like us and then yet aren't like us? That could even just be ideological, right?
It's a great metaphor, that's for sure. No, the lizard people thing is funny because, like, I think really it's a whole symbolic thing. The thing that makes it fun to talk about as a phenomenon is the fact that it does seem like a lot of people have sold their souls essentially just for the consumer economy and just for the sake of keeping that machine turning. And so the most common person is probably Mark Zuckerberg when talking about lizard people. And it's just kind of funny. And I think the reason why it just has so much impact is not because people believe they're actual lizards. It's just that symbolic truth is just as important as actual truth. And so, like, literally, metaphorically, he's an actual lizard person. And so
we all have lizard brains, don't we?
Right.
Kind of.
At the center. And I feel like it's almost...
It depends on who you ask. 1960s model all agreed that we would refer to things as, the reptilian brain, the mammalian, or whatever.
And the reptilian is all that's left. When people are trying
now
to...
they call it the triune. They call it the triune brain, which is actually even more occult if you think about it. But keep going.
And the lizard brain might regenerate, and might the outer cortex, if it gets damaged, may or may not be as capable at repairing itself, because most reptiles, again, I think certain or amphibians at least will regrow limbs and
so you could play first-person shooter video games.
Accusing people of thinking only with their lizard brain, and then our monkey brain is the thing that has ADD, that has all these like crazy ideas that gets us in, curiosity killed the cat style. But the lizard brain at the center, and if someone's acting like a lizard person, then it's like almost like they've been lobotomized and they're under mind control.
I propose what we do is we start calling people that we don't know to happen to literally be lizard people, triunic people. Because triunic refers to when we say the reptilian brain, the triune brain. And when you start to look for examples of people that live in the triune brain sphere, the first thing that comes up, of course, is video games, because people that play a lot of first-person shooters, play a lot of Fortnite and all that other kind of thing, they end up training the instinctual response part of their triunic brain. So if this happens, then you respond with this as quickly as possible. If your finger is touching heat, move your finger away from the heat as quickly as possible. You don't even have to think about that. Your triunic brain actually connects to your nervous system. Your nervous system knows the responses the triunic brain will have before it has it. It's like, oh, I know that guy. He's super predictable. He's going to do this. That's the idea of the triunic brain. So having really good instantaneous response is a good thing, but it is what we refer to as the reptilian brain. The idea of Thomas Jefferson.
It's interesting,
right?
Because one of the main aspects of the reptilian brain is what is called the basal ganglia, and his name is Patient HM. I think I've mentioned him on here before, but if you look up Patient HM, it's an individual
guy that has like water in 2/3 of his brain, and yet he still walks and talks.
Yeah, well, the memory part of his brain was completely obliterated. So it's like a partial lobotomy when he was 23 years old. And he's basically the guy who couldn't remember for 30 seconds, right?
Memento.
But what they learned was they could teach him skills. And it's because his basal ganglia was intact. So so this also happened to another guy named Phineas Cage, who was the individual who had a railroad tile go through his head. And his whole personality changed, and he couldn't remember certain things, but he could still work. Because skill isn't necessarily part of our memory. But a lot of UFO researchers kind of associate the basal ganglia because it responds to like strobe lights and stuff. So the whole idea of aliens or individuals who have been abducted being controlled by aliens and or MK Ultra mind control is a lot of times zeroed in on that basal ganglia, because the basal ganglia can perform tasks without you remember performing the task.
Now that photo of that last gentleman you were talking about there, he's holding a rifle, which I think is meant to be, or I believe that's looks to be a
No,
weapon. of
I'm
some
pretty
sort,
sure that's the that's the
Oh,
spike
thank
that went
you,
through
thank
his
you.
eye.
Well, and the question is, does he still have the ability with moral reasoning? And did
No,
the
he
way-
became very aggressive. Phineas
Okay.
Cage, in particular, became very aggressive. Actually, I think he divorced his wife because he became irritated.
Okay.
So he was basically zeroed into the reptile brain, in which he was mostly working off of anger and negative emotions, things that are usually kept in check by the neo-mammalian or the frontal cortex of
Sure.
the human brain.
Sure.
Like actually knowing who you are and separating yourself from what's happening. And I don't know. I just think it's interesting. Like if you pay attention to certain researchers, the basal ganglia will always be talked about as far as like what they suspect is the function, where the functionality of actual mind control is taking place.